In the shadowy waters off Guadalcanal, Japanese sailors whispered in muted tones about an American cruiser that fired with unbelievable speed. Her guns crackled like machine guns shredding cloth. They were not mistaken to dread her. USS Helena, CL-50, would survive what should have destroyed her at Pearl Harbor, only to return with a vengeance that reshaped naval warfare across the Pacific. This is the tale of the ship that refused to die, the cruiser that earned her name through relentless firepower, and the 1,000 men who turned her into legend. In an age when battleships ruled the seas and carriers foretold the future, Helena proved that a light cruiser with resolve could alter the tide of history. Her story begins not in battle, but amid the hardships of the Great Depression. As America painstakingly revived its economy, the Navy launched an ambitious plan to rejuvenate its aging fleet. The St. Louis-class cruisers embodied a new philosophy of naval design, vessels that could deliver devastating firepower while retaining the agility to waltz with death. When her keel met the slipway at the Brooklyn Navy Yard on a cold December day in 1936, few could have foreseen the destiny awaiting hull number 50. The laborers who riveted her plates and shaped her armor were building more than a warship. They were forging an instrument of endurance and retribution. Helena stretched 608 feet from bow to stern, her slender hull slicing through the sea with a beam of just 61 feet. Yet her real strength lay in her weaponry. 15 6-inch guns housed in 5 triple turrets, capable of unleashing a storm of steel. These were no ordinary naval rifles. The Mark 16s could cycle shells at an astonishing pace, 8 to 10 rounds per minute per barrel. Do the arithmetic. Up to 150 shells every 60 seconds from her main battery alone. It's no wonder the Japanese came to call her the machine gun cruiser. Her secondary battery included 8 5-inch dual-purpose guns, equally adept at swatting aircraft or smashing destroyers. 4 Parsons turbines hurled her through the waves at 32.5 knots, driven by 8 Babcock and Wilcox boilers producing 100,000 horsepower through 4 bronze screws. With a range of 10,000 nautical miles, she could hunt anywhere in the vast Pacific. Yet specifications told only part of her story. What truly made Helena exceptional was her crew, 868 officers and sailors who turned steel and gunpowder into something akin to immortality. Helena slid into the East River on August 27, 1938, christened by the wife of Montana's senator. The champagne that shattered across her bow was meant to bring good fortune, though whether it did depended on one's idea of luck. Her early years read like a peacetime voyage log. After commissioning in September 1939, Helena sailed to Uruguay, where her crew received a grim preview of their future. The wreck of the German pocket battleship Graf Spee lay scuttled in Montevideo Harbor after the Battle of the River Plate. Young American sailors gazed at the twisted wreckage, wondering if they were staring at their own destiny. The Pacific beckoned, and Helena answered. By September 1940, she had joined the Pacific Fleet, spending months in Hawaiian waters perfecting her deadly craft. Gunnery practice, damage control, navigation drills, the endless repetition that turned civilians into fighters. As 1941 waned, Helena entered Mare Island Navy Yard for refits. The Navy, sensing the storm approaching, equipped her with new 1.1-inch anti-aircraft guns, like giving a boxer brass knuckles before a brawl. On the morning of December 7, 1941, Helena rested at berth 1010 in Pearl Harbor's Navy Yard. Across the harbor, the battleships lay in neat formation along Ford Island. The mighty Pennsylvania was meant to occupy Helena's berth, but fate intervened. The dry dock needed Pennsylvania more than the pier needed Helena. At 0757, Lieutenant Commander Shigeharu Murata led 9 Kate torpedo bombers toward what he thought was Pennsylvania. Through the morning haze, Helena's silhouette resembled a battleship closely enough to doom her. The lead plane released a Type 91 torpedo, that streaked through the still harbor waters at 40 knots, slipping beneath the mine layer Oglala moored alongside and striking Helena at frame 75, just below her armor belt. The blast tore through her engineering spaces like a giant's hammer. Engine room number 1 and boiler room number 2 became twisted, flooded tombs within seconds. Seawater gushed through a hole big enough to drive a truck through, but Helena fought back immediately. Within 2 minutes, her forward diesel generator roared alive, sending power to her gun mounts. As Japanese aircraft wheeled overhead for their second pass, Helena's anti-aircraft guns barked defiance. 4 bombs straddled her during the next wave, each near miss pelting the decks with steel rain. The ship that should have perished stayed afloat through miracles of discipline and human courage. 40 men lay dead, 100 more wounded, but Helena lived. In the wardroom, blood mixed with oil as medics struggled to save the injured. On deck, gunners remained at their stations even as comrades fell beside them. The Japanese pilots who claimed her sinking had made a grave mistake. They had awakened the little sister of a sleeping giant, and she would not forget. In the aftermath of Pearl Harbor, Helena looked like a patient clinging to life. Water sloshed through her ruptured hull as emergency pumps labored non-stop to keep her afloat. Yet beneath the scars beat a heart that refused to quit. By December 9th, just 2 days after the attack, Helena limped into dry dock number 2. Navy Yard workers swarmed over her like surgeons attending a critical patient. Steel plates were cut, shaped, and welded over her wounds. The temporary patches would hold until she could reach a proper hospital. The journey to Mar Island in January 1942 tested every weld and rivet. Pacific swells pressed against her patched hull, searching for weakness. Her crew stood vigilant at damage control stations, ready to shore up any breach. They needn't have worried. Helena was tougher than she looked. At Mare Island, Helena underwent a transformation that went beyond mere repair. The Navy had learned bitter lessons at Pearl Harbor, and Helena would benefit from that brutal education. Her conning tower, which limited visibility during night actions, gave way to an open bridge where antiquated 1.1 in Chicago pianos once stood. Crews mounted 4 quadruple 40mm Bulwers guns, Swedish-designed democracy wrapped in American steel. But the real revolution came in electronics. Helena received the new SG surface search radar, a marvel that could peer through darkness and fog to find enemy ships at ranges that seemed like sorcery. Combined with new FC and FD fire control radars, Helena could fight blind, a crucial advantage in the knife fights awaiting her in the Solomons. While darkness helped conceal ships from visual spotting, radar gave Helena the ability to see without being seen. Under Captain Robert H. English, then Captain Philip, who commanded until September 1942, her crew trained with fanatic intensity. They had accounts to settle. Gunners drilled until they could load and fire in their sleep. Damage control teams practiced plugging holes and fighting fires until their responses became automatic. Every man aboard understood their mission. They were returning to the Pacific, not as victims, but as hunters. In the mess halls, sailors spoke of revenge. In the engine rooms, mechanics coaxed every possible revolution from the turbines. Helena wasn't just repaired. She was reborn as an instrument of vengeance. By July 1942, Helena was ready. As she passed beneath the Golden Gate Bridge, bound for the South Pacific, her crew lined the rail. Some waved at girlfriends and wives on shore. Others stared westward, toward the enemy who had drawn first blood. The machine gun cruiser was heading to war. The Solomon Islands in late 1942 were a green hell where America and Japan bled for every yard of jungle. Guadalcanal, with its crucial airfield, had become the Pacific War's grinding wheel. Every night, Japanese destroyers and cruisers raced down the slot, the channel between the Solomon chains, to reinforce their garrison and bombard American positions. By early October, Helena served in Task Force 64 under Rear Admiral Norman Scott. Unlike many American admirals who still thought in terms of battleship lines, Scott understood that radar and rapid fire would rule these waters. He drilled his ships relentlessly in night combat tactics, though he made the curious decision to use USS San Francisco as his flagship instead of the radar-equipped Helena. October 11, 1942. The WWII Day of Reckoning approached as American reconnaissance planes spotted Admiral Aritomo Goto's force. Streaming toward Guadalcanal, 3 heavy cruisers and 2 destroyers carrying reinforcements and bombardment shells. Scott positioned his force off Cape Aspirants, ready to spring history's trap. As darkness fell, Helena's S-grader operator, radioman 3rd Class Robert S. Brown, hunched over his scope. At 23:25, a phosphorescent blip appeared. Enemy ships at 27,700 WWII. Helena had found the Japanese before they even knew Americans were hunting. What followed was organized chaos. Scott, operating blind on San Francisco, ordered a column turn that accidentally placed his force across the Japanese T, the perfect position for a naval ambush. On Helena's bridge, Captain Gilbert C. Hoover, who had assumed command in September, grew increasingly frustrated. His radar showed enemy ships at 5,000 WWII practically point-blank range, but Scott hadn't given permission to fire. Finally, at 23:46, Scott's ambiguous Roger to another query was interpreted as permission to engage. Helena's turrets, already trained on the enemy, erupted in violence. The first salvo caught the heavy cruiser Ioba completely unprepared. 6 shells slammed into her bridge, killing Admiral Goto instantly and wounding her captain. The Japanese admiral died believing his own ships were firing on him. He never imagined Americans could strike from the darkness with such precision. Helena's guns achieved rates of fire that seemed impossible. Spent brass casings rolled across her decks like golden rain as loaders worked in perfect synchronization. The sustained muzzle flashes lit up the night, earning her the nickname that would follow her to the grave. The heavy cruiser Ferotica tried to shield the flagship, but sailed into a steel hurricane. Helena's shells found her torpedo tubes and long-lance torpedoes. Japan's most feared weapon exploded on their own deck. Furutaka burned like a Viking funeral ship before sliding beneath the black waters. In 14 minutes, it was over. Helena had fired over 1,400 rounds, her barrels glowing cherry red in the darkness. The Battle of Cape Aspiran was America's first clear surface victory against the Imperial Navy. Helena had proven that American cruisers could fight and win at night, the enemy's chosen battlefield. As dawn broke, oil slicks and debris marked where Japanese ships had died. Helena's crew, exhausted but exhilarated, had their first taste of victory. It wouldn't be their last. November 1942 brought desperation to both sides at Guadalcanal. The Japanese prepared a massive reinforcement convoy, and Admiral Scott's victorious task force, now led by Rear Admiral Daniel Callahan, stood as the only barrier. Callahan, brave but inexperienced in night combat, made the same mistake as Scott. He chose San Francisco as his flagship instead of the radar-equipped Helena. On the night of November 12-13, Helena's radar again proved prophetic. At a row 124, her SG scope detected Japanese ships entering Iron Bottom Sound. The waters of Guadalcanal littered with so many wrecks, they'd earned their grim nickname. 2 Japanese battleships, Ha and Kirishima, led a bombardment force intended to pulverize Henderson Field. What erupted at 01:48 was less a battle than a bar fight with 14 guns. The American column practically collided with the Japanese force. Ships fired at point-blank range, sometimes unsure whether their targets were friend or foe. Searchlights stabbed through the darkness. Star shells burst overhead, and tracers crisscrossed like deadly fireworks. Helena's radar gave her a critical edge in this melee. While other ships struggled to identify targets, her fire control tracked Japanese vessels with electronic precision. She opened fire on what her crew believed was a battleship, likely he at just 4,200 watt-hours. Her rapid-fire salvos walked up and down the enemy's length, sparking fires and explosions. The destroyer Akatsuki made the fatal error of illuminating Helena with her searchlight. Every American ship that could bear immediately concentrated on the illuminated destroyer. Helena's 6-in shells joined, 5-in and 8-in rounds in a convergence of naval gunfire that literally blew Akatsuki apart. She vanished in a massive explosion, taking all but a handful of her crew with her. Helena then shifted to rapid fire against 3 more destroyers, her guns cycling so fast that Japanese survivors reported thinking Americans had developed a new automatic cannon. One destroyer limped away, burning, another went dead in the water, and the third fled into the darkness, trailing smoke. Through it all, Helena danced between salvos, her engineers pushing her turbines to and past their limits. At one point, San Francisco crossed directly between Helena and her target, forcing a check fire that probably saved American lives. The friendly fire incidents that night claimed Admiral Callahan and Captain Casson Young of San Francisco, brave men killed by American shells in the confusion. After 40 minutes of point-blank savagery, the Japanese withdrew, battered by dozens of hits, including many from Helena, lingered behind with jammed rudders. American planes would finish her the next morning. The first Japanese battleship lost in the war. Helena emerged with 1 man dead and minor damage. Her gunners had fired over 1,500 rounds, and her barrels were shot out from the sustained fire, but she had helped stop the Tokyo Express cold. Without that bombardment, Henderson Field survived to launch the planes that would savage Japanese transports over the coming days. As November 13th dawned, Iron Bottom Sound lived up to its name with new wrecks littering the seafloor. Helena had proven herself again, but the cost grew steeper with each battle. Between the legendary battles, Helena lived a grinding routine that tested men as thoroughly as combat. The Solomon Islands offered no respite. If Japanese shells didn't kill you, tropical diseases might. Helena's crew developed the 1,000-yee stare common to Guadalcanal veterans, men aged beyond their years by constant vigilance. Life aboard Helena followed the rhythm of war. General quarters at dawn and dusk when submarines preferred totak. Days spent bombarding Japanese positions on Guadalcanal, turning jungle strongpoints into moonscapes. Nights patrolling the slot, radar operators straining to catch the first glimpse of enemy vessels. The crew developed their own culture, born of shared danger. Helena's laundry became legendary, somehow maintaining pressed uniforms even after battle. The ship's band, Helena's Hottentots, played swing music on deck between actions, their jazzy renditions of blues in the night, carrying across the water to other ships. Food was whatever the supply ships brought: Spam, powdered eggs, and coffee strong enough to float a wrench. Fresh vegetables were memories. The ice cream maker, when it worked, produced the most valuable commodity in the South Pacific. Men would trade almost anything for a Dixie cup of vanilla. Captain Hoover proved a calm and reliable leader throughout his command. Unlike fame-hungry officers, he understood that in these waters, survival itself was victory. He trained his crew relentlessly, but also knew when to ease the strain. Movie nights on the fantail, boxing bouts on the forecastle, small comforts that reminded the men what they were truly fighting for. The November 23rd dismissal of Captain Hoover, for allegedly failing to properly report the torpedoing of USS Juno, hit the crew like a gut punch. They had just endured hell together, and now their captain was gone. Victim, many believed, of bureaucratic revenge. His successor, Captain Charles P. Cecil, who took command in December 1942, had to earn the trust of a wary crew. Cecil would lead them through their final trials. December 1942 and January 1943 blurred into an exhausting rhythm of battle and routine. Helena bombarded Vila and Munda, guarded troop convoys, and chased phantom radar contacts across the restless seas. Her crew became masters at reading the ocean and sky. Knowing their survival often depended on spotting a torpedo wake or bomb drop a second before the enemy. By February 1943, Helena was in dire need of repair. Her engines wheezed, her guns showed worn rifling, and her hull bore scars from near misses. The voyage to Sydney, Australia, felt like a trip to paradise. Fresh food, cold beer, and women who spoke their language awaited them. For a few precious weeks, Helena's men remembered the taste of peace. But wars never pause for long. By April, Helena was back in the Solomons, her guns reconditioned, her men rested, ready for the next campaign. The nightly runs down the slot resumed. The machine gun cruiser still had work ahead. As spring turned to summer 1943, American forces prepared to leap up the Solomon chain. New Georgia, with its airfield at Munda, was the next bloody step toward Tokyo. Helena would take part in the preparatory bombardments that turned Japanese fortifications into smoking craters. The routine had become grimly familiar. Slip into contested waters under cover of night, shell designated targets, then withdraw before dawn invited retaliation. On May 13th, Helena led a bombardment force against Vila, her shells marching through fuel depots and barracks with practiced precision. The Japanese, learning from experience, had moved most assets inland, but Helena's guns still found plenty to obliterate. June 1943 brought even heavier action. Intelligence warned of major Japanese reinforcement efforts, and every American cruiser strained to intercept the enemy's movements. Helena's crew, seasoned veterans by now, prepared their ship with grim focus. Extra ammunition was loaded until the magazines bulged. Damage control materials were placed in ready stations. Men wrote letters home, just in case. On June 30th, Operation Toenails, the invasion of New Georgia, began. Helena provided gunfire support for the landings at Rendova, her 6-inch shells clearing jungle in 100-yard bursts. Japanese coastal batteries fired back sporadically, their splashes creeping toward Helena until her counter-battery fire silenced them. July 4, 1943, Independence Day, found Helena bombarding Munda Airfield once again. The Japanese had bolstered their anti-aircraft defenses, and the sky filled with black bursts of flak. Helena's gunners answered, their 40mm rounds turning the night into a fierce fireworks display. It was democracy versus fascism, traced in luminous streams of tracer fire. That evening, Helena refueled at Tulagi, taking on oil and ammunition for yet another mission. Reconnaissance had detected a fresh Tokyo Express run, Japanese destroyers rushing reinforcements to New Georgia. Task Force 68, with Helena as a vital part, would move to intercept in Kula Gulf. The crew sensed something different about this one. Maybe it was the full moon forecast for that night, stripping away the darkness that usually shielded them, though their radar remained keen as ever. Perhaps it was the rumors of Japanese heavy cruisers joining the convoy, or perhaps it was simple fate catching up. Helena had survived too many battles without serious damage. As July 5th gave way to July 6th, Helena entered Kula Gulf for the final time. Her radar team, the finest in the fleet, would again spot the enemy first, and as always, her guns would roar with rapid fury. But this time, the enemy would strike back with a vengeance even the machine gun cruiser could not withstand. The moon climbed over Kula Gulf like a stage light, turning the dark waters silver and stealing away the concealment the Americans usually relied upon. Admiral Walden Ainsworth, commanding from the cruiser Honolulu, led Task Force 68 into the Gulf just past midnight on July 6, 1943. Helena followed in formation, her radar already painting contacts to the northwest. The Japanese had learned from past defeats. Admiral Teruo Akiyama's reinforcement group included 10 destroyers armed with the fearsome Type 93 long-lance torpedoes, deadly weapons capable of reaching 20,000 yards at nearly 50 knots. More crucially, the Japanese had finally devised countermeasures against American radar tactics. At 0136, Helena's radar picked up enemy contacts at 22,000 yards, and for once, Japanese sensors detected Task Force 68 almost at the same instant. Both sides began their deadly approach, knowing this would be a gunfight where speed mattered more than armor. At 1:57, Admiral Ainsworth ordered the attack. Helena's turrets, already tracking their targets, erupted immediately. Her first salvos targeted the destroyer Nyazuki, Admiral Akiyama's flagship. The range was 11,000 wide, comfortable for Helena's experienced gun crews. Nyazuki never had a chance. Helena's second salvo found her, and the following salvos turned the destroyer into a floating pea. In-shells detonated her torpedo warheads, shattered her bridge, and opened her hull like a can opener. Admiral Akiyama died in the opening minutes, his last sight, the muzzle flashes that spelled his doom. But even as Nyazuki died, her sisters had launched their long lances. 10 destroyers fired volleys of torpedoes before turning away at high speed, a tactic that traded gunfire for torpedo accuracy. Nearly 50 torpedoes now raced through Kula Gulf's waters toward the American column. Helena shifted fire to the destroyer Suzuki, her radar-directed shells finding the target despite the range. But she had made a critical error. Her initial salvos used flashless powder carefully hoarded for night actions. When those special charges ran out, she switched to standard propellant. Each salvo now lit up the night like lightning, clearly marking Helena's position for Japanese torpedo directors. At around 2:03, Helena's luck ran out. 3 long lances found her in quick succession, and the machine gun cruiser's death began. The first torpedo struck forward of turret 1. The explosion was catastrophic. Either her forward magazine detonated, or the torpedo's 1,080 WWII warhead simply obliterated her bow. Turret 1 vanished in a pillar of flame that reached 200 ft skyward. The blast rolled through the ship, buckling bulkheads and throwing men against steel walls like rag dolls. Before damage control could respond, the second and third torpedoes struck amid ships below her armor belt. These hits broke Helena's keel, the ship's backbone. Her engine rooms flooded instantly, turbines screaming to a stop as Sea-Eater rushed in. Electrical power failed, plunging internal compartments into darkness, broken only by battle lanterns and flames. Captain Seal immediately recognized the fatal nature of Helena's wounds. With her keel broken, the ship was already beginning to jackknife. Have passed the order all captains dread. Abandon ship. Dread. Abandon ship. But Helena's gunners weren't finished. Even as she settled, her aft turrets continued firing, their crews refusing to leave their posts until the last possible moment. Turret 4 fired until seawater flooded the handling rooms. Turret 5's crew manually trained their guns, firing until the list became too severe to elevate their barrels. The ship broke into 3 sections. The bow section, everything forward of Turret 2, had already vanished. The stern section, containing nearly 400 men, floated independently. The center section, containing the bridge and most of the engineering spaces, rolled over and sank within minutes. Men struggled in the oil-covered water, some wounded, all shocked by the sudden transition from combat to survival. The destroyer Nicholas, risking torpedo attack, moved in to rescue survivors. Her crew pulled exhausted men aboard while her guns engaged Japanese destroyers, trying to finish off Helena's survivors. Dawn on July the 6th found Kula Gulf littered with the debris of battle and nearly 500 Helena survivors still in the water. The bow and stern sections remained afloat, serving as temporary life rafts for hundreds of men. But Japanese aircraft would arrive with daylight, and Admiral Ainsworth faced an agonizing decision. Nicholas and Radford had pulled 739 men from the water during the night, their crews forming human chains to haul oil-soaked survivors aboard. But radar showed Japanese warships still in the area, and dawn meant certain air attack. Ainsworth ordered his ships to withdraw, leaving hundreds of Helena's crew behind. For the men still in the water, July 6th became a test of endurance and will. The tropical sun burned exposed skin while salt water tortured wounds. Sharks drawn by blood circled the survivors. Men formed groups supporting the wounded and sharing the few life rafts available. On Helena's floating stern section, Lieutenant Commander John L. Chu organized the survivors. The stern still had some food and water, plus medical supplies. Chu established watches, rationed supplies, and maintained discipline. When Japanese float planes strafed the survivors, men dove beneath the twisted steel for cover. That night, 2 American destroyers attempted a rescue, but were driven off by Japanese warships. The survivors spent another night clinging to wreckage, their numbers diminishing as wounded men slipped away and sharks took their toll. The story might have ended there, but for Coast Watcher Reverend AWE Sylvester on Vela La Vela Island, he reported the survivors' location and coordinated with local natives to guide rescue efforts. On the night of July 7th or 8th, destroyers Nicholas and Jenkins, along with fast transports Dent and Waters, returned to Kula Gulf. Using whaleboats and rubber rafts, they pulled 165 men from the water and the floating stern section. The stern finally sank during the rescue, as if Helena had waited to ensure her crew was safe before taking her final plunge. But 88 survivors had drifted to Japanese-held La Vela. For a week, they evaded enemy patrols with help from native scouts and coast watchers. Living on coconuts and drain water, moving only at night, they made their way to the island's northwest coast. On July 16th, destroyers Taylor, Maury, Gidley, and Ralph Talbot executed a daring daylight rescue, evacuating the last of Helena's survivors under the noses of Japanese forces. The final tally of Helena's crew of 868, some 168 men died in Kula Gulf or during the rescue operations, but 700 survived, saved by the courage of destroyer crews who risked everything and the determination of survivors who refused to give up. Helena's story could have ended in Kula Gulf, another casualty in the grinding Solomon Islands campaign. But legends don't die easily. In Navy wardrooms and enlisted clubs, veterans told stories of the cruiser that fired faster than any ship had a right to. Her rapid-fire barges became the stuff of mythology, growing with each retelling. The Navy honored Helena's remarkable service with 7 battle stars and the very first Navy unit commendation ever granted to a ship. The citation specifically highlighted Cape Esperance, Guadalcanal, and Kula Gulf, 3 engagements where Helena's guns helped shift the balance of the Pacific War. Her legacy extended far beyond medals. Helena's combat record shaped new developments in American naval tactics and technology. Her effective use of radar in night engagements became standard procedure. The necessity of flashless powder was written in blood. Lessons from her sinking led to overhauls in damage control training and design. For decades, Helena rested quietly beneath the waters of Kula Gulf, her exact resting place unknown. Survivors gathered for reunions, their ranks thinning each year, but their recollections remained vivid. They remembered the thunder of her guns, the vibration of her decks, and the faces of shipmates who never came home. In April 2018, Paul Allen's research vessel, RV Petrel, located Helena 2,800 feet below the surface. Remote cameras captured her hull number, 50, still visible on her stern. Her gun turrets remained trained outward, as if waiting to continue the battle. The discovery brought long-awaited closure to her surviving crew and their families, finally confirming where their beloved ship lay. Today, Helena stands for more than a lost warship. She symbolizes the thousands of sailors who fought the critical naval battles of World War II. Her story endures as a timeless lesson in bravery, endurance, and sacrifice. The ship that survived Pearl Harbor to become the nemesis of the Tokyo Express proved that heroes aren't always invincible. Sometimes they're simply too resolute to surrender. From her birth in Depression era, Brooklyn to her death in the warm waters of the Solomons, Helena embodied the American war spirit. Built by hands that needed work, manned by youths who grew into veterans, and commanded by officers learning to fight a new kind of war, she was democracy forged in steel. The Japanese were right to fear the ship they dubbed the machine gun cruiser. But Helena was more than rapid-fire guns and cutting-edge radar. She was 868 Americans who refused to bow to defeat, who turned tragedy at Pearl Harbor into triumph at Cape Esperance and Guadalcanal. Even in death, she struck back, her guns firing until the sea swallowed her. In the silent depths of Kula Gulf, Helena keeps her final watch. Coral now coats her turrets. Fish drift through her passageways. Yet her legacy endures. She remains what she always was, the fighting ship that earned her name through raw determination, and a tribute to the generation that saved the world. They called her the machine gun cruiser, and she lived up to that name until the very end. In the chronicles of naval warfare, few ships fought harder, fell braver, or left a prouder legacy than USS Helena, CL-50. As her crew always knew, she was one hell of a fighting ship.